You've heard the fairy tale about John F. Kennedy. Camelot, the shining moment of American idealism, where a young, charismatic leader ushered in a new frontier of hope. I'm sure that's the version you know. But that's not the history. That's the brochure. The reality wasn't built on hope. It was built on a dirty deal cut in the back of a Chicago restaurant. The central truth of the Kennedy dynasty is simple. Joe Kennedy bought the 1960 election with Mafia leverage. But he made one fatal mistake. He forgot to tell his son Bobby the price. We fought for every vote. The American people chose a new direction.
The American people? Don't make me laugh. He won because I said he'd win. I put him in that chair.
Let's go back to the smoke-filled rooms of 1960. Picture the landscape. It's late 1960. The race between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy is a coin toss. It is statistically tied. Joe Kennedy, the patriarch, knows that charm doesn't win swing states. Union muscle does. He needs the Teamsters. He needs the docks. And he knows exactly who holds the leash.
Joe knew the score. He and I, we go back. Prohibition days. He wasn't some saint. He was a bootlegger who got legit. So when he needed Illinois, he didn't go to the voters. He came to the outfit. He sat down with me and he didn't ask for a donation. He asked for a favor.
And in my world, a favor isn't free. The deal was simple. I deliver the unions, I deliver the wards, and the Justice Department stays the hell out of Chicago.
A straight swap. Protection for votes.
Enter the go-between, Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the board. Sinatra was desperate to be the bridge between the cool of the Rat Pack and the power of the White House. He was naive. He thought he was a diplomat connecting two great families. In reality, he was just a bagman passing messages between the aristocracy and the gutter.
West Virginia was the hurdle. If I couldn't win a Protestant state, the party wouldn't nominate a Catholic.
We needed resources. We needed organization on the ground. I didn't ask where the money came from or who spoke to the union stewards.
In politics, you don't look under the hood of the car that drives you to the inauguration. You just get in.
I needed Illinois. I needed the win. That was the only reality that mattered. Look at the evidence. It's staggering. In the West Virginia primary, the Chicago outfit sent Paul Skinny D'Amato
to spread cash around the sheriffs and union bosses. Suddenly, the anti-Catholic bias evaporated.
But Illinois? That was the masterpiece. Kennedy won the state by less than 9,000 votes. That is a razor-thin margin. In the mob-controlled districts of Cook County, voter turnout was miraculously high.
We're talking about dead people voting. We're talking about river wards where the tally waited until the downstate Republican votes were counted so they knew exactly how many ballots to stuff. We worked the wards. Broken arms, free turkeys, whatever it took. I told my guys, this is for me. And they delivered. Later, the FBI, they had bugs everywhere. They heard me. I said it plain. Listen to me. I made that guy. I got him in there. Nixon knew it too. He knew we stole it. But he couldn't prove it without burning the whole system down.
It wasn't two different worlds. It was one big party. Frank introduced me to Jack, and Frank introduced me to Sam. They wore the same suits, drank the same scotch. The president and the mob boss, they were just men who wanted things. I saw the envelopes. I saw the phone calls. The line between the White House and the Underworld wasn't just blurred, it didn't exist. I was the one standing in the middle, and I thought it was glamour. I didn't know I was standing on a fault line.
The election was won. The champagne popped in Hyannisport. The Kennedys celebrated the dawn of a new era. But in Chicago, Sam wasn't celebrating a victory. He was calculating a debt. He had delivered the presidency, and he expected the Attorney General to pay up. The bill was due. Then came the morning after. The election was secured, the inauguration was over, and the mob waited for their return on investment. They expected a friendly face in the Department of Justice. Maybe a corrupt bureaucrat they could buy, or at least someone who knew how to look the other way. Instead, on December 16, 1960, John announced his choice for Attorney General. It was his little brother, Robert.
And for Sam, this wasn't just a personnel decision. It was a declaration of war.
The one man in America who hated the Mafia with a religious fervor was now the top cop in the country.
I didn't take this job to make friends. I took it to clean house. When I looked at the map of organized crime in this country, I didn't see businessmen or colorful characters. I saw a cancer. A private government within a government, enforcing its own laws with murder and extortion. It was a moral rot. And I decided immediately we weren't going to negotiate with it. We were going to cut it out. I didn't care who they knew. I didn't care about their so-called influence in the unions. I told the FBI to stop hunting communists under every bed and start hunting these parasites. You believe this guy? You believe the stones on this kid? We put his brother in the White House. Me. I did that. And now this little runt, this Boy Scout is kicking down my doors? It didn't make sense. In my world, a deal is a deal. You shake hands, you deliver, you get paid. But the Kennedys, they take the goods and then they call the cops. I told my guys, it's a double cross. A pure, straight up double cross. Joe came to me, begged for help, and now his kid is putting tails on my car and subpoenas in my face? It was insulting. It was like I bought a racehorse and the damn thing bit me.
This is where the tragedy becomes Shakespearean. The evidence suggests that Joe Kennedy never told Bobby about the deal. He kept his Crusader son in the dark, using the mob to win the election while letting Bobby believe it was a victory for righteousness. So when Bobby unleashed the Get Offa Squad, a specialized unit of prosecutors solely dedicated to destroying the Teamsters and the outfit, he didn't know he was violating a blood pact. The FBI wiretaps from this period are legendary. They picked up Sam ranting in the Armory Lounge, screaming about the betrayal. He wasn't just afraid of prison, he was furious at the lack of honor. Bobby is his own man. He has a very strong sense of right and wrong, absolutes. I'm the politician, I have to deal with the world as it is.
But Bobby wants to remake it. I couldn't exactly call off the Attorney General, could I?
What would I say? Go easy on the murderers because they helped us carry Illinois?
No, I had to let him run. I had to stand back and let him do his job, even if it made things complicated.
I just made sure I wasn't in the room when the subpoenas went out.
We turned up the heat. We increased the number of attorneys in the organized crime section from 17 to 60. We indicted Hoffa. We went after the tax records of every major boss in Chicago, New Orleans, and Las Vegas. I wanted them to feel the pressure every time they picked up a phone or walked down the street. If they thought they had immunity because of some past history, they were wrong. I am the law, and the law doesn't owe favors to gangsters.
The pressure was relentless. Sam was followed 24/7 by FBI agents who played golf behind him, stood next to him at church, and mocked him in public. The protection he had purchased turned out to be the most aggressive persecution in American history. The outfit was losing millions. The favor had become a liability. And in the underworld, when a liability becomes too expensive, you liquidate it. The tension was shifting from the courtroom to something much darker. Here is where history dissolves into absolute absurdity. You have to look at the Church Committee reports from 1975 to believe it. In 1961 and 1962, the United States government was effectively schizophrenic. On one side, you have Attorney General Robert launching a holy war to put Sam in prison. On the other side, the Central Intelligence Agency is actively recruiting Sam to assassinate Castro. It is the ultimate irony. The CIA knew the mob had lost their casinos in Havana. the Sanssouci, the Tropicana.
They had a motive.
So while the Justice Department's top official is wiretapping a crime boss's home, the U.S. intelligence agency is meeting with the boss's lieutenant.
Johnny R., handing him poison pills to slip into Castro's drink.
They come to me, the government. The same government trying to lock me up comes to me with their hat in their hand and says, Sam, we have a common problem in Cuba. Patriotism? Don't make me laugh. It was business. Castro took my hotels. He took the skim. So yeah, I sat down with the CIA. I agreed to help them clip the beard. But you see the joke, right? I'm working for the flag in the morning and dodging subpoenas from the president's brother in the afternoon. It was a madhouse. And I thought, surely if I do this solid for the agency, the heat from Bobby has to stop.
That's how the world works. Quid pro quo.
I was the link. I don't think people realize how small that circle really was. I was carrying envelopes between the President of the United States and the head of the Chicago Mafia. I'd be in the White House one night and the Armory Lounge the next.
I was the courier for a relationship that wasn't supposed to exist.
Jack would ask, "How's our friend in Chicago?" And Sam would ask, "Is he happy?" I realized eventually that I wasn't just a girlfriend to these men. I was the human evidence of a conspiracy. I was the wire that connected the detonator to the bomb.
The breaking point didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in Palm Springs, March 1962.
This is the moment the debt was officially defaulted on.
Frank Sinatra had spent a fortune renovating his estate, anticipating a presidential visit. He built a helipad specifically for Marine One. He installed 25 phone lines for the Secret Service.
He thought this was his coronation, the moment the world would see that the chairman of the board and the president were blood brothers.
I saw the logs. I saw the phone records.
The President of the United States cannot stay at the home of a man who is friends with Sam.
It was a security nightmare.
Hoover at the FBI was sending me memos detailing every call Sinatra made to the outfit. I told Jack, you cannot sleep in that bed. You cannot be seen with him. It wasn't just about optics anymore. It was about vulnerability. I didn't care about Frank's feelings. I cared about the integrity of the office. I told Jack to cancel.
I like Frank. He's a hell of a guy. But Bobby brought the files.
He showed me the transcripts. If I stayed at Sinatra's and the papers found out that Sinatra was fronting for Sam at the Calneva Lodge, it would be the end of the administration.
We had to pivot. We stayed at Bing Crosby's place instead. A Republican. It was safer. It was cleaner. Disrespect. That's what it was. Frankie builds a palace for the guy, and he stays at Crosby's? It was a slap in the face to Frank, but it was a message to me. It meant, we used you, we got what we wanted, and now you're trash. Frank was so mad he took a sledgehammer to that concrete helipad. He smashed it to pieces. And me? I realized then that there was no deal. There was no protection. These guys were just takers. And in my neighborhood, when someone takes what isn't theirs and disrespects you, you don't just sue them. You settle the score.
Sinatra was excommunicated. The mob was furious. The betrayal was absolute. The Kennedys had severed the tie, but they forgot that men like Sam don't just walk away.
By late 1963, the atmosphere wasn't just tense, it was toxic.
The Kennedys had pushed the Chicago outfit into a corner. The mob was losing millions of dollars a year due to the Justice Department's relentless crusade. Their casinos were being raided, their loan sharking operations were being dismantled, and their frontman, Frank Sinatra, had been humiliated. In the underworld, you can survive a loss of money, but you cannot survive a loss of respect. The motive was no longer just about profit. It was existential. The Kennedys weren't just a nuisance. They were an active threat to the survival of the organization.
You have to understand the rules. They aren't written down, but they're written in blood. If a guy takes your money and doesn't deliver the goods, he owes you. If he takes your money and then uses it to try and put you in a cage, that's not just a bad deal. That's a death sentence.
It wasn't personal. I actually liked Jack. He was a fun guy. But business is business.
If you break a contract in my world, you don't get a court summons. You get a closed casket.
The Kennedys thought they were untouchable because they lived in the White House. They forgot that the White House has windows, and every window is a target. And then, Dallas, November 22nd. The world stopped. But look closely at what happened 2 days later. Lee Harvey Oswald, the man charged with the crime, is silenced on live television by Jack Ruby. The Warren Commission wanted you to believe Ruby was a distraught patriot who loved the president. That is a convenient fiction. Jack Ruby was a low-level operator with deep, documented ties to the Dallas mob boss Joseph Savello, who reported directly to Carlos Marcello in New Orleans, one of the men RFK was hunting. The House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded in 1979 that Ruby's actions were likely a gangland cleanup. He wasn't avenging JFK. He was closing the loop.
When I got the call, when the bureau chief's voice told me the president was dead, his voice was cold. He didn't offer condolences. He just said, "The president is dead," and hung up. And in that moment, the blindness fell away. I knew immediately that this wasn't a lone nut. This was a ricochet. I had declared war on the most dangerous men in America, and they didn't strike back at me. They struck at the one thing I loved more than the law. I killed him. My crusade, my arrogance. I pushed them too far, and they collected the debt from Jack. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I wore his clothes. I was walking through a nightmare of my own making.
The official story, the lone gunman, became the safe narrative. But the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1979 reopened the wounds, concluding that organized crime was the most likely conspirator.
And perhaps the most chilling evidence isn't what was said, but what wasn't. Immediately after Dallas,
The FBI wiretaps on Giancana and the other bosses went silent. The chatter stopped. The complaints stopped. The rage evaporated. It was the silence of a debt settled. We don't have a signed order from Sam Giancana. We never will. But we have the motive, the means, and the burning anger of a betrayer scorned. The history books say Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. The evidence suggests he was just the final payment on a bill that came due.
You politicians talk about honor. You talk about the law. But in the end, you're just thieves in better suits. At least when I screw someone over, I have the decency to look them in the eye.
The story didn't end in Dallas. If you want to know what happened to the men who knew too much, make sure to subscribe. The files are only getting darker from here. See you in the next video.